Hello, I'm Wirta Kinney, Assistant Curator of Academic Programs at the Allen Memorial Art Museum. In my role at the Allen, I work closely with faculty members to integrate works from our collection in courses across the college and conservatory, ranging from art history and history to biology and math. In their classes, students often use objects to think about their course content in new ways, or to even develop skills such as visual literacy, close looking, or evidentiary reasoning. Each time I work with a professor, we cater the content of the class and the activities that we do so that they respond directly to their course. The video that I'm sharing with you today was created in the summer of 2020 for one of 5 summer enrichment courses that were offered for incoming students to introduce them to liberal arts learning at Oberlin. The course that this video was made for was titled Cinema and Change: Ritual, Identity, and Coming of Age, which examined the complex transition from childhood to adulthood as depicted and explored in a range of cinematic genres. The 8 films the students watched and analyzed over the term illuminated the challenges, rituals, institutions, and narratives of becoming an adult. In light of the disruption of traditional rituals marking this passage due to COVID-19, this course had an added goal of using film to help students reflect on the nature and importance of cultural markers in times of change. My video, as you will see, therefore explores how some of these themes, such as coming of age, transitions, and passage of time, become visualized in works of art. But because a goal of this class was also to enable students to connect the films with their own lived experience, I also model techniques that can help viewers slow down, deconstruct, and analyze what they see, so that they could understand the references packed inside of not only works of art, but also film, and more importantly, the visual and material world that surrounds them. After watching this video, I hope you too are able to look with new intention at films, but also the world around you. At the end of this video, I will include a list of the films that the students watched in the course. In this moment of global change, you might find that these films offer unique perspectives on moments of transition. At the very least, you'll have a way to spend a January at home. Enjoy. Studies have found that visitors to art museums spend an average of 8 seconds looking at a work on display. That's this long. What did you see? What do you remember? What ideas did it evoke? Perhaps very little, because while we live in an image-saturated world, it's rare that we slow down, look intentionally, and really think about what an image is, how it is, and why it is. So try again, spending 8 seconds focused on one small detail. How would you describe the emotions captured in this subject's eyes? What specifically makes you say that? Now, do her lips have the same emotion? Why? Or why not? How does this wisp of hair relate to what you saw in her face? What strikes me first about this image is the girl's distant gaze. She seems, to me, to be deep in thought. I feel a tiny tinge of sadness in her face in the way that her eyebrow is ever so slightly furrowed. The small reflections of light in her eyes make me wonder if they are glossy because they are welling up with tears, or maybe she had her eyes open for too long, like when you're in a staring contest. Her mouth is similarly between emotions, not at rest, but seemingly on the verge of expression, but it is sadder than the enigmatic lips of the Mona Lisa. As I try to make sense of what she's feeling, I'm disappointed that the background seems to give me no clues. It's just an institutional-looking white, except for this little blur that I can't make out, and that frustrates me. The title of this work is Isabel Watching Titanic, December 1998. How does that influence your reading of the details in her face? The precision of the title allows me to situate this image that has very little visual reference to time or place with a surprising level of precision. I recognize that this girl, who I assume is Isabel, is likely now a woman of my age. I realize that both she and I shared, without knowing it, the experience of watching the film Titanic. But even the situating in time and space contained in the title doesn't answer all of my questions or help me to pin down what this work is about. I'm wondering, is her expression a response to the film? Is it an emotional moment in the movie? Or has she just been staring at the screen too long? The movie was 3 hours and 15 minutes. Or maybe she is experiencing all of the complicated emotions I remember having when I was a teenager. All of this makes me want to know who is taking this photograph, getting so close to what I now see as a person full of so much emotion. The photograph is by the Dutch artist Renneke Dijkstra. Her work explores people, and often adolescents, in transitional moments. Her breakthrough Beach series, made between 1992 and 1996, focused her lens on young subjects on beaches across the US and Europe. Using similar techniques to those that we see in the photograph of Isabel, in this photograph, Dijkstra uses light to create shadows that bring the subject to the foreground, making her feel closer to us. She also used a large format camera, which allowed her to capture details with precision and to manipulate the depth of field, a charm you'll explore more in this course. Dijkstra also gives concentrated attention to how she can relate to her subjects in order to capture the transitional moments she seeks to explore. When she photographs adults, she often captures them in moments of exhaustion, like new mothers after birth or herself after vigorous swimming. But with young people, she finds it easier to capture their emotions. She says, quote, "With young people, everything is much more on the surface, all the emotions. When you get older, you know how to hide things." To what extent do you think that observation is visible in the photograph? What's remarkable to me about Dijkstra's photographs is that she uses the camera and its ability to quickly capture something fleeting in order to find a moment that is in between. The photograph of Isabel makes me think about time in multiple directions, coming together at once: youth and adolescence, the time of the movie, and the time of Isabel's life in 1998. A photographer that also does this, but in a different way, but with the same level of sensitivity to capturing the subject, is Jess Dugan in their series To Survive on This Shore, which is a collection of 12 photographs of transgender and gender nonconforming older adults. The portfolio at the Allen, which was made over a 5-year period, contains images of subjects by Dugan, as well as texts from interviews conducted by the social worker Vanessa Fabre. The stories and images tell the nuanced stories of joy, struggle, and self-realization of this group that is often underrepresented in art. In doing so, Dugan heightens our attention to the very real challenges that trans and gender nonconforming people face in surviving into old age. Let's focus in on an image of 83-year-old Bobby from Detroit, Michigan. I want to ask you to look slowly and deliberately at this image, as I did with Dijkstra's photograph of Isabel. As you do so, I will read Bobby's story. As you hear Bobby's words, think about how Dugan has visualized them through their choices of framing, lighting, pose, and objects. I have traveled extensively. It started out when I was in the Air Force. I was the grandfather, or whatever you'd call it, of the drone program. I mean, I played golf with presidents, with Jerry Ford and whatnot, and I certainly have met the older Bush and the younger Bush and Reagan a couple of times. I've been in the White House. I've been up and down the Pentagon, all levels, and I've worked extensively with the CIA. 11 years ago was my surgery, to this date almost, and I started hormones 12 years ago. And I really have been in the cross-dressing business or the transgender business since I was probably 4 or 5 years old. I mean, I've got that history. But I didn't know some of that history until I tracked it back later in life, when I saw this more obviously in front of me. I said, "Oh my God, this is what I was doing when I was 4 or 5 years old." And of course, it all fits into a channel. But in that day, I'm talking about being born in 1930, that was the Great Depression, there were no words for any of this, except that I think my mother knew, because when I asked her to teach me to knit, she did, and she'd teach me some other things that I asked if I could do, like cross-stitch and whatnot. So all the basic clues were there all along. I think people talk in either or terms, right? Before transition and after. But to me, it's really a development. I'm proud of both lives. I'm proud of both me's, if you see what I'm saying. And I feel it has been a remarkable thing to have happened to a person. I'm grateful. You can't just become a woman with a knife or a pill or anything like that. It takes a whole combination and a sequence and a formation. You've got this time span. It's a learning experience. It's a little bit of everything. It's what I call going through the internship phase, stumbling through the adolescent phase, and then going through the maturity phase. I've gone through the dating routine. That was my internship. I had to go through the internet, go out and stumble with it and flirt, and I got pretty good at it. I kind of worked at it. I'm not bad with words. I could play peekaboo on Skype. Then I finally picked up Frank. I kidnapped him from a local bar up here one afternoon, an ex-Marine, and we dated for a long time. Finally, one day, it was so nice that Sunday morning with our head on the pillows, I said, "Oh, I've got something to tell you." And after I told him, he says, "You're better than any woman I've ever met. Now come on, Bobby, we can drop that." Didn't care a damn. Where I live now, I think some people know for sure who I am and don't really care. But I also don't have it written on my forehead, so there are those that don't. They just take me as another old lady, a nice old lady. In what details of the photograph did you see Bobby most completely? How did Bobby's words frame your understanding of this image? Did anything in the image contradict what Bobby said about herself? Did anything in the image add ambiguity to that telling? How is the passage of time in this image of Bobby different or similar to that captured in the image of Isabel? Both of these photographs are portraits, images of people. We are meant to understand them as presentations of a subject. Because of the medium of photography and the fact that they are clearly titled with the name of the person and some sense of the date, we might assume them to be simple documents of a person's likeness. What should be clear, though, is that the artist who operated the camera made choices in how that person was presented to us. They used the tools of light, setting, dress, objects, depth of field, and frame to make us look at this person in a particular way. They went further in framing our experience of seeing them by giving the image a title that included that person's name. Dijkstra and Dugan have made us look at Isabel and Bobby in a particular way, perhaps even made us feel something in a particular way. The American photographer Cindy Sherman is an artist who has played with ideas about how image making, and especially filmmaking, has impacted the ways in which women understand themselves and their own identity. This photograph is one of the 69 images in her Untitled Film Stills series made between 1977 and 1980, in which Sherman physically transformed herself through costume, makeup, and modes of comportment into a host of feminine cliches from 1950s B-movies, including the brutalized victim, the vamp, the hooker, and the housewife. She worked on this series for 3 years until she said she ran out of cliches. Which cliché do you think she is playing here? What clues do we have to understand that? Perhaps the trench coat and the bright blonde hair? Where is this cobblestone alley? And why is there a symbol of a fallout shelter on the wall? Though their well-planned compositions feel incredibly familiar, as if we might be able to make a one-to-one match with an actual film, Sherman's photos are not exact replicas of a particular scene. Working in the 1980s, she used black and white photography purposefully to visually reference classic films. In this particular image, the strong lighting is cinematic, drawing stark contrasts between dark and light, suggesting a film noir. Rather than praising leading ladies by mimicking them, Sherman uses reference as a form of questioning, asking us, the viewer, to look again at depictions of femininity in popular cinema as empty and misogynistic. How then do you think she would consider the role of her photographs beyond the frame or the screen? Appropriating and reframing images from popular culture, and especially film, is an artistic strategy that many contemporary artists engage to diverse ends. Like Sherman, the contemporary Black queer artist Mickalene Thomas mines the visual culture of a previous generation, in this case the 1970s, to represent images of Black female bodies. Thomas finds her images in blaxploitation films, a genre featuring Black actors and aimed at Black urban audiences, but one rife with stereotypes. She also looks to popular publications like Jet magazine. At the same time, she references a history of Western painting. For example, you can recognize the pose of the woman in her collage relating to canonical depictions of sensual beauties like Venus in this painting by the Italian Renaissance artist Titian, or Olympia in the 19th century canvas by the French painter Edouard Manet. But by emptying the scene of all other bodies, Thomas draws us into the direct, empowered gaze of her subject. The strong position of her arms and legs embody for me the demanding tone of the title. You're going to give me the love I need. Knowing that Sherman used the reframing of B movies to question feminine cliches, and considering Thomas's work here, what do you think motivates a Black queer woman to make us look again and anew at these decades-old images? Is she questioning in the same way as Sherman was? What visual evidence do you have that supports that claim? Unlike Sherman, who uses the closely allied medium of photography to reproduce film, here Thomas collages silkscreen print, cloth, digital photographs, and glitter to make an entirely different visual world of an appropriated image. I should note here that this collage, which is 2 feet by 2.5 feet, miniaturizes Thomas's monumental 8-foot by 12-foot painting of the same name. While the collage recognizably references a visual world drawn from Black and Western culture, Thomas's choice of kitschy materials begins to make what might be a familiar visual image seem strange. She queers these once heteronormative images to allow for the production of new meaning outside of the original context. Thomas is not chastising the male gaze, but instead subverting it in order to empower the Black female gaze, and specifically the queer Black female gaze. To me, this image captures, in a way that I can't exactly put my finger on, the power of a woman appreciating the beauty of another woman. And what I like the most is that Thomas does so in an aesthetic that is so unapologetically loud and flashy. Sherman's photograph and Thomas's collage allow us to reflect on the ways in which popular culture can be reused and remixed by artists to make us think about the assumptions it contains and to subvert them. These works allow us to go back to B films and blaxploitation films and understand the ways in which they have shaped identities, and not only feminine ones. They also help me to think about the importance of giving the same focused, deliberate attention to looking at visual culture that doesn't fit strictly within our standard definitions of art. On August 30th, 2012, 10,000 people came to the Walker Art Center in Minneapolis, Minnesota, to take part in an event that had garnered international media attention, the Internet Cat Video Festival. Attendees fully embraced the occasion, bringing their cats or even dressing as cats. Sitting in a field conceived of as a cultural commons, they watched 79 internet cat videos divided into the genres of comedy, musical, drama, and foreign, which had been selected from over 7,000 crowdsourced nominations. At the end of the evening, the Golden Kitty Award was bestowed upon the film Henri le Chat Noir. The festival was the most viral event of the Walker's Open Field Project, a work of social engagement that included other events such as pickling demonstrations, children rolling down a hill, and a symphony of lawnmowers. Investigating the notion of the cultural commons, the organizers of Open Field sought to, quote, challenge the notion of the museum as the primary author of artistic content and cultural experience. They, quote, resisted the idea that creativity is an individual pursuit belonging primarily to the artist and operating outside the realm of everyday life, end quote. They, in part, were asking us to look at the hierarchies of value that determine what art is and whose culture is worthy of our attention. By asking us to do something as seemingly frivolous as watching a video of a surprised kitten, they were making us think about how museums make us look at some things with attention and not others. Having us do so opens up a range of more difficult questions about how museums play a role in shaping narratives of culture, and in turn, whose culture and representations matter.